Welcome to the virtual awards ceremony for the 21st Annual Holocaust Art and Writing Contest. I'm Marilyn Herron, Director of the Rogers Center for Holocaust Education at Chapman University. Because of the COVID-19 outbreak, we were unable to hold the awards ceremony scheduled for Friday, March 13th. Yes, it was a Friday the 13th. And it was also the day that Chapman University moved teaching and operations online. It was a heartbreaking decision to cancel both the awards ceremony and our June study trip for first place recipients. But here I have some good news, since we will be inviting this year's first place winners to participate on the trip we are planning for June 2021. The last months have been very difficult ones for all of us. They give us more reason, not less, to celebrate your accomplishments today. To honor the 259 schools in 28 states and 6 countries that registered for this year's contest, and to cheer the hundreds of educators and thousands of students who participated. The survivors and rescuers to whose testimonies you responded with your prose, poetry, art, and film entries believed that by sharing their experiences, they were honoring the lives of the murdered family members and friends whose voices had been taken from them. They believed that their stories, their memories, could teach and inspire us never to be silent in the face of hatred, racism, or bigotry in any form. By participating in this year's contest, you have made their hope, their belief that memory matters, a reality. Now it is time to celebrate you.
I'm Bill Elperin, president of the 1939 Society and a son of 2 Holocaust survivors. Welcome to our virtual awards ceremony and congratulations to the student participants, their parents, teachers, and principals. I know you are going through unique, difficult, and unusual times. Many of you have missed traditional milestones like normal graduation, proms, and the certainty of going off to college. But as always, we must place things in perspective. For those of you who believe the stay-at-home order was unduly burdensome, consider Anne Frank, who, along with 7 others, hid in a small attic space for 761 days, well over 2 years, without internet, TV, or Amazon Fresh, quietly trying to remain undiscovered in order to stay alive. On a positive note, you are actually living while history is being made, a history that will hopefully provide for positive change that you can tell your grandchildren about. I have previously said that yours will be the last generation to meet and talk to a Holocaust survivor. I'm afraid that came about too fast. We have lost too many survivors in the last few years. Most of our member survivors have passed away. That makes it all more imperative for you to carry their message forward. You have taken the first step by entering the contest, but you must continue to tell their history. You must continue to tell their personal story. You must continue to tell the lessons you have learned. You must encourage everyone to learn those lessons. Never forget, never again.
I'm honored to share with you a few of my memories. I was born in 1933 in Ostrowiec, Poland. My name at birth was Pesa, but my family and friends called me Pesala. I am the youngest of 6 children. I had 3 brothers and 2 sisters. As the youngest, I learned to speak up so I would be seen and heard. I was able to learn that very quickly, never dreaming that in time I would need to learn the exact opposite, how to become silent and invisible. The first years of my childhood were wonderful, but they didn't last. I was almost 6 when Germany invaded Poland September 39. At first, the Germans allowed us to stay in our home, but then we were ordered into a ghetto, where 7 of us shared a single room. My brother Herschel learned that the Germans were going to deport us to a death camp. We were ordered to report to the town square, but my uncle and brother decided we should hide instead. They dug a hole under a shed, and all 44 of my family hid. At the time, my 2 sisters were 16 and 18. Since they were young and strong, they thought that they would send them to work if they left the bunker. Unfortunately, instead, they were deported to Treblinka death camp and murdered. Over the next month, I was alone. I moved from one hiding place to another. Moving was very dangerous, and each time I tried to make myself invisible. But one day, my plan didn't work, and a Ukrainian soldier caught me. He took me to the factory gate where I saw my mother standing in line with other women, getting ready to leave to our newly created camp. When she saw me, she pulled me to her and tried to hide me between the women, but a German SS guard found me and threw me against the wall. I blacked out and fell down. My mother and the other women were gone. The guard began to choke me, demanding that I show him where other Jews were hiding. We looked and looked, but didn't find anyone. He dragged me to the wall, took out his revolver, and told me to turn around. I was strong-willed, and so I refused. I begged him to let me see my mother and father one last time. Just then, a German guard appeared, and the 2 of them started talking and laughing. The German guard told him I would be dead soon and not to waste a bullet on me. So he shrugged and let me go. Soon after, I was sent to Ostrovets hard labor camp, where I worked loading bricks into wagons. In August 1944, my mother, father, and I were loaded into cattle wagon and taken to Auschwitz-Birkenau. I was 10 years old. The train was crowded, and I was so hemmed in by people that I couldn't breathe. I made a noise so that people would know I was there and not trample me. When the doors of the train finally slid open, we saw SS guards holding dogs straining at the leash. They ordered men to the left and women to the right. To this day, I can't remember if I ever said goodbye to my father. I never saw him again. My mother saved my life by ordering me to say that I was 14 years old instead of my real age. That meant I was old enough to work. I was eventually put in a children's barrack. I tried to make myself invisible whenever the infamous Dr. Mengele came into our barracks to take children for his horrible medical experiments. Often the children he took would never come back. Then, one day, we heard bombs falling, and we knew the war would soon end. When the Nazis left the camp, the first thing we did was to go into the storeroom and get bread. I remember putting bread under my clothes. We also took warm clothes from the mountain of clothing and shoes that we found. I envied one girl who found a matching pair of boots right away. I looked everywhere, but my feet were so small that I couldn't find many boots that would fit. Eventually, I found one boot of orange and brown felt with brown leather trim. I finally found another that was white felt with black trim. It didn't bother me that they didn't match. I remember how happy they made me. I was almost as if I were becoming visible again from the ground up. They did not kill my spirit. I was still a child. On January 27th, the Russians liberated us. They dressed us up in striped uniforms, which we never had before because they were warm. And they took photographs, some of which you might have seen. It's now been 75 years since that day, but it seems like yesterday. My mother and I reunited. I will never forget the look on my mother's face when she saw me. I knew I would never have to be invisible again. Becoming invisible and silent saved my life. It also made me realize that our voices are a vital part of who we are. I vowed never to be silent or invisible again. For the last 25 years, I have spoken about my experiences. When I do, I remember my sisters and my other members of my family who had their voices and their lives taken from them. Never let anyone make you invisible. Never let anyone silence you. Find your voices when you see injustice and use it, because silence is not an option.
and offering. Like bread broken and laid before me, Samuel Getz offers his Holocaust testimony. In his video, Sam acknowledges that while the memories are painful, it is, quote, so necessary and important to share these experiences. Share. That is the word he uses. He does not offer to tell or recount his story. He offers to share it. Sam understands that sharing can both be a gift and a burden. From 1928 to 1939, Sam shared in a peaceful life with his parents and brother in Tarnow, Poland. Then, in November 1939, on the first anniversary of Kristallnacht, Sam shared in the horrors of Nazi anti-Semitism as German civilians wearing swastika armbands shouting "Juden raus" forced his family from their apartment and held a gun to his head. In 1940, Sam shared his mother's despair when efforts to smuggle his older brother out of Soviet territory failed. On June 22, 1941, days after Sam's bar mitzvah, Germany violated its non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union, and Sam shared in the hope that the Nazi oppression in Poland would end. But over the next few weeks, he had to share in the Jewish community's disappointment when that did not happen. When Sam was 14, his parents were deported to Belzec and killed. Not long after, Sam was sent to Plaszow and then to Gross Rosen. In those concentration camps, Sam shared in the painful beatings, the fear of gas chambers, and the dangerous, backbreaking work of clearing rocks from the tunnel construction site. For a while, though, he was also able to share hope in his future with Willie, a boy who worked in the tunnels alongside of him. In January 1945, Sam entered Ibensi. A few months later, on May 6, 1945, the first American tank pulled to the camp gates, and Sam shared the exhilarating joy of freedom. Now, 75 years after his liberation, Samuel Getz offers to share his testimony with a generation that knows the Holocaust only through history books, and with those who wonder how the Holocaust could have happened, and with those who deny it ever happened at all. But sharing is two-sided. It involves both giving and taking, partaking and participating. When Sam says, "I feel the need to share these terrible experiences with you and many others so it is not forgotten," it is my choice whether or not to accept his offer. Am I strong enough to partake of Sam's offering? The choice is not simple. Sharing Sam's memories means acknowledging that I have a role to play in the story of the Holocaust. It means recognizing my own responsibility to truly hear the survivors, to learn from their testimony, and to defend against hatred and injustice. I choose to accept Sam's offering and to allow his memories to motivate me and guide me. Through my own life, I will share the lessons of Sam's testimony and the testimony of all the Holocaust survivors.
Frozen winds whipped across the road, whistling over snowdrifts that blanketed the Polish countryside. As night turned to dawn, rows of men in striped jumpsuits trudged onward under a slate-gray sky. Nothing louder than a distant cough dared to interrupt the cadence of snow crunching beneath their weary feet. The date was January 18th, 1945, a little more than a day after the Germans evacuated the work camp of Treblinka. Soviet forces were closing in, and Jewish prisoners were being marched towards Auschwitz in a group of over 800. 17-year-old Jack Lewin was among them, shivering in the bleak winter. As he walked, his mind wandered to a time before Treblinka, before witnessing the selection of his mother in Birkenau, and before starving in the ghetto. He remembered sunny days spent singing and dancing in the summers of his youth, though he no longer recognized the joy and freedom he once felt. With each step, Jack thought of a loved one who had been taken by the Nazis. His father, Hirsch, his mother, Dina, his cousins, his aunt. One by one, they slipped out of his life and into the snow, each carrying with them a piece of Jack until his will to continue on wasted away. Surrounded by hundreds, he was alone. Suddenly, the prisoners came to a halt. Jack winced as pain rushed back to his legs that grew numb from the somber rhythm of the march. Pangs of hunger rattled around his stomach as the cold cut deeper into his being. Minutes later, a commandant appeared before the prisoners and asked those incapable of walking any further to step forward. Anticipating that he would be placed in a supply wagon, Jack was the first to volunteer, followed by a group of older men broken by the march. Standing amongst people labeled Musliman, or walking corpses, Jack quickly realized his mistake. He had become a burden to the Nazis. In an instant, he knew he would be marched into Auschwitz and killed. But he was not afraid. At the very moment that death became imminent, relief filled his soul like a sip of warm tea. I was so much at peace. I was completely resigned. I knew that we were going to the gas chambers, but I didn't care. One thought kept me going, a happy thought. I knew that when I get to the gas chamber, I'll be able to sit down. On that bitter morning, Jack reached his breaking point. He had no energy left. His emotions were warped so drastically by the anguish he endured that he accepted his execution with calm reserve. Aside from the millions of lives lost, perhaps the most overlooked tragedy of the Holocaust is the lifetime of suffering that followed those fortunate enough to survive. Though Jack was rescued from Auschwitz 10 days after leaving Treblinka, a part of him is still lost in the Polish countryside, buried with his family in the vast ubiquity of snow.
Maroon hanky. Clearly pressed and folded, it was placed into my hand, a last token of a soon-to-be memory. I received a maroon hanky. I did not know the value of an object until I had one. I did not know the value of people until I had none. But my one object carried all the worth in the world, a maroon hanky. I don't know what happened to him. All I know is the walls were rising, and there were bombs, more people dying. And Warsaw was in flames, red, licking flames, like the colour of my maroon hanky. We watched from the window, havoc unleashed on our homes, yet we were the opportune. We were on the right side of the window pane, the side where we still wore silky dresses made by the sisters, the same silk of my maroon hanky. I was lucky, not because I was saved, but because I learned the true meaning of love. His love was sewn into my heart, the same way I held the hanky so tight at night. That its fibers have sewn into the fibers of my skin. Because of my father's honor, I survived. Because of his love for us, he died. He sacrificed it all so we could breathe the air of freedom. To the man who gave to me the thing that has carried all of my tears, a maroon hanky, his maroon hanky.
You were 11. You were 11 when the officer grabbed the head of your bird and twisted it all the way around until the neck snapped. As you gasped, the officer leaned into you and said, "Like the bird died, you will die too." You didn't know what to do. You felt trapped with no way out, like your bird in its cage. You were being shipped away with no explanation to some foul, God-forsaken camp where you would meet your end just as violently as your bird. Over 5 years, you lived in 7 camps. You migrated from camp to camp like a bird flying south to escape the cold winter. But you could never escape death's cold winter. In Auschwitz, when you were doomed to die, you didn't feel anything. You felt so light, like a bird, and you thought about nothing. Suddenly, you were lifted by the wings of your memories. The thoughts of your family and friends carried you, and you realized you had to live and recount the tragedy that you experienced in order to prevent it from ever happening again. So you hid. You built a nest of bodies around you, like a bird, to mask your breathing. You were lost, not roosting in the place you were supposed to be. Naked and alone, you thought all hope was lost until the girls swooped in and saved you. By taking you under their wings, like a bird does her nestling, they helped you survive. They helped you push on, reminding you that one day everyone will be freed. You could fly far away from this hellish cage and clean your mind, pluck out the bad memories, and forget all the pain. But you will never forget. You will sing your song of sorrow like a bird spreading the message. Your story is preventing that pain, that tragedy, from ever happening again.
So it was impossible to be human and act human and not being able to express yourself, to say something, to ask, to talk like a human being.
What does it mean to be human? Is it the capacity to think and create? Is it the ability to speak our minds? And what teaches us to be human? Is it our beliefs that teach us to respect one another? Or is it the emotions we share with our loved ones that show us to have empathy? Being human, though, is not without fault, and sometimes being human means losing our humanity. This is the world that Helen Collin lived in, an inhumane world full of cruelty, where at the age of 20 she was dehumanized and known by the number of 1919. A merciless world where she was separated from her mother and younger sister at Auschwitz. An unjust world where she was punished for who she was, where she wondered if it would have been better to die. During these unfathomable events, Helen Collin could no longer express herself as she once had, use her voice to say something about the cruelty she was witnessing, or ask how anyone could disregard another human being. She felt like she had become nothing, and it seemed impossible to continue to live. And yet, despite living through this inhumanity, Helen Collin exhibited the greatest of all human qualities, the ability to imagine a better world, to believe in the good nature of others, and to know that even in the darkest days, when everything seems lost, hope is possible. Helen Collin believes that all humans deserve respect.
I beg everybody that listens to this message to please be polite, be gracious to another human being, regardless of color, race. Because we're all born to live and enjoy life, and we're all entitled to the freedom of life. And unless and until we're going to respect one another, that's the greatest love you can give, is respect.
Being human means having the ability to have a voice to say something, and create a world where all human beings can express themselves and be respected for who they are. It's in our hands now.
We're shocked with the decision to go on, that we must survive to tell.
This is Ruth Brand's story. Ruth Brand was born in Romania and recalls growing up in an environment of anti-Semitism. On the day she was sent to the concentration camps, she was forced to a cattle car, leaving her belongings and life behind in one day.
We were just physically thrown in 3 days and 3 nights of this unbelievable situation.
When she arrived, she was immediately separated from her family by Mengele.
Selecting the people to go left or right, we had no idea what it meant, and I was quickly pulled back again and thrown to the other side. And that was the last time I ever saw any member of my family.
She was starving, malnourished, and weak, yet she fasted on Yom Kippur. and when others were appalled at her actions, she replied,
Well, maybe he wants to see that dafka, that in spite of it, we are still going to fast.
This was one of the ways Bran had the courage to live through this nightmare, by putting her faith in God. Despite her horrid circumstances, she experienced Hesed. She was in charge of 200 girls who had to dig through lanes of dirt, but allowed them all to secretly rest.
Because I knew that 5 minutes rest can save your life.
Bran ate her daily breakfast, or barley mixed with boiled water, in the morning and worked the rest of the day, remembering one time when she had barely a single layer while working in the snow. She remembers the act of Hesed from the other girls. One ripped her kerchief in half for Ruth, and another gave her one of her gloves.
These were the kind of chesed that we did show to each other. And one day, hear over the loudspeaker, you are free. You are liberated. It was the first time of the whole experience that I cried.
These stories from these brave survivors cannot simply be left unheard. We can't change their history, their pain, but we can make their memories matter. It is the least we can do, to spread their painful but valuable stories to the rest of the world.
And it's like I made a vow that I will talk.
And I will make a vow to not forget, for those who suffered and lost their lives. And the first step is to shine a light on their stories, because in that way, we can listen to their message loud and clear.
And maybe that's the only reason I was left alive, to remind.
Hello everyone, my name is Jennifer Keene. I am the Dean of Wilkinson College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences at Chapman University, or as we like to fondly refer to ourselves as, the heart and soul of the university. I want to congratulate all the students and their educators who participated in this year's contest and offer a special cheer to those students who are finalists and second and first place winners. I myself am an historian, and my field of expertise is in the First World War. So I'm particularly interested and have a special affinity for this year's prompts. Memory matters. Whose story will you tell? After all, we know that stories bring history to life and remind us that behind all the numbers are individuals, unique individuals, who left a special impact on their families, their societies, their nations, and the world. As you have learned through participating in this contest, engaging with stories and the memories they convey can be life-changing, and they can lead us to see our world from new perspectives and with new awareness. I hope that you will remember Chapman University, and particularly Wilkinson College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences when you get ready to think about where you want to come to college. In the meantime, I look forward to seeing you next year in person at the 22nd Annual Holocaust Art and Writing Contest. I hope you will participate again, and I look forward to seeing your submissions on the theme, Sharing Strength, Sustaining Humanity. And again, congratulations.